Brother man, in the Nubian cosmos, a woman transcends amongst multifaceted kaleidoscopes, amongst 10,000 ancestral vibrations.
What is a woman?
Man, we all know what a woman is. A woman is a...
What is a woman?
A woman is an adult female with almost always 2 X chromosomes. Brother man,
You
youngin, you a sellout.
I'm a straight Democrat, but I'm for the best person.
Oh, yes,
But
sir.
now why you got Donald Trump?
Because I paid attention in school when I was a kid. I know the true history of both the Republican and Democratic Party. I know that they really didn't switch.
Duh.
During the Nixon Southern strategy, that one became more clever than the other in dealing with black people. We the Democrats, we were the Republicans' friends. We was their friends, but we were the Democrats.
Her head explodes.
How many refugees has Poland taken?
0.
And you're proud of that?
If you are asking me about Muslims illegal immigration, none, not even one will come to Poland. Not even one if it's illegal. We took over 2 million Ukrainians who are working, who are peaceful in Poland. We will not receive even one Muslim because this is what we promised.
But I asked
This
not
quota
about
system
illegal
failed.
immigrants. I asked about refugees. And Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission president, says that you're racist. You sound proud of the fact that you haven't taken any refugees.
But this is why Poland is so safe. This is the reason why we had not even one terrorist attack. Look at the streets in Poland, and we can be called populists, nationalists, racists. I don't care.
Well, that clears that up.
In phases 1, 2, and 3, they did what no other studio could do. That every time a new Marvel movie was coming out, we all expected it to be great. We would go into the theaters not wondering if it would be great. We used to go into the theaters expecting like it was magic. And since Endgame, that magic is gone. We've gone from expecting it would be great to hoping it'll be good.
And the Disney stock just keeps going down and down, and Bob Iger is what's going on with that stock?
Who's racist? Trump. Now tell me what makes him racist.
The fact that he called for the public execution of the 5 Central Park motherfuckers even before they went to trial.
Let's say your daughter gets raped.
I'm looking to kill a motherfucker.
Let's say your daughter gets raped, right? Now, I happen to be in the area because I was wilding, I was robbing people, harassing people. Your daughter gets raped, she's beat so bad that she can't even remember what happened.
Can't even function.
Police arrest me for being in the area, and I admit to doing that to your daughter, right? How would you feel? How would you feel? Answer the question. How would you feel? How would you feel? What did you say right before, just now? Right before I let you finish, what you were saying? No, you said you want to kill a motherfucker.
Right.
Is that what you said?
Right.
Yo, if you admit to raping somebody, whether you did it or not, you should never admit it to. And the fact that you did is okay for me to feel like that. Now, you can say Trump is insensitive for not apologizing after finding out that they didn't rape him. But at that moment, he had all right to feel like that. Just like you feel the same way.
She was stunned.
Why did you argue that religious services, religious people pose a greater risk of infection than people gathered to argue for defunding the police?
The policies restricted all types of activity in the district.
All types of activity in the district?
Yes, Senator.
Did it restrict mass protests in the district?
I don't believe it said anything one way or another.
Of course it did, because it didn't accept mass protests. If you want to come and protest, defund the police, if you want to support that, that's fine. You can gather en masse, person to person, close up, thousands of people. That's okay. You know the facts. You were a good lawyer. Why'd you lose?
Senator.
Oh, come on, Judge. Don't make me do this. Mayor Bowser was going to mass protests herself.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight?
Thousands of people. At the same time she was doing that, she was prohibiting churches from gathering socially distanced outside wearing masks.
Rules
This
for
is
thee,
episode
but not
9.
for me.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not too long ago, 2 friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and...
So one thing we're going to do tonight, guys, is we're going to go over this particular week that we've had. It's been pretty interesting. This is the Conservative Take. My name is Kyle Suggs, and we're going to be talking about some interesting headline that happened today with NATO. and what NATO's been doing to try and basically they're basically trying to compensate for America. So that's our headline here. So the situation here is Europe is preparing to replace the United States with NATO. And to me, that's a very, very dangerous world to be in. And we'll talk about that because we're talking about something very similar to a realignment internationally in Europe. I told my wife this the other day, that the way NATO is going, the way Europe is going, the EU, the way they're going, they really appear to be going the total tyrannical route, where we see nationalism going to the extent over top of the will of the people as they are coordinated with their allies and expanding on power using Russia as the scapegoat. That's just my opinion. And I'm not here to shill at all for Russia. In fact, I don't even want to even be involved with Russia. But what we're seeing potentially, and this is just me off the top of my head, you guys comment below if you think this is something that is possible. Is it possible that Russia and the United States could actually be more aligned against Europe in terms of a situation, in terms of security? I mean, what happens if you have a Europe that has just gone totally fascist? I mean, really fascist. I'm not talking about how the left calls the right fascist. They just do that because that's a strong word. Just like the N-word, they use that word, or racism, they use that word all the time because it is a strong word and it evokes emotion and it gets people on the defensive. But I'm talking about real, genuine fascism. If that were to happen with Europe, with the EU in particular, and they expand and they, let's say, get in with Ukraine, they bring them into NATO, and now Russia is really in a situation, and the United States is no longer in this particular scenario worldwide, then you can really you can see Russia going against NATO with the United States backing them, at least through a proxy war. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit, and we're going to bring up an article from the Daily Liberty Daily. It talks about this, and it's just a situation where it seems like Zelensky of Ukraine is just doubling down, and he has no other recourse now, it seems, other than staying in power and essentially risking a World War III. So before we do that, I'm going to talk to our latest sponsor for this video. And that sponsor is Liberty Coffee. Weak coffee is for the weak. And at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, no mediocrity. No selling for mediocrity, just like in 1775 coffee. It's a single origin, small farm, hand-picked specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out nonsense when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans roasted just to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it up, a bold, the bitterness, without the bitterness, and vitality mushroom blend, a real energy and lasting focus, no synthetic garbage. For K-Cups, which you see here on the screen here, whole beans or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775 coffee, use code STUDIO for 15% off, and start your morning with coffee that stands for something. And every single dollar you spend enters you into a Cybertruck and $30,000 in cash. So let's get into this particular article here from the Liberty Daily, because it's like I said before, it is really something that is pretty shocking. I'm gonna pull it up here on the screen, and we're gonna go over this. It's on the. We have it here. European leaders are drafting a plan to replace the U.S. in NATO. So, in the ultimate act of seeking a Trump-proof the NATO alliance, even well into the future, Europe's largest military powers are now drawing up plans to keep the alliance strong in case of a U.S. exit from leadership over the next 5 to 10 years. Informal discussions have involved the United States, France, Germany, and the Nordic countries, who are envisioning a managed transfer of power and leadership, reshaping the NATO bloc. Financial Times writes that the discussion are an attempt to avoid the chaos of a unilateral U.S. withdrawal from NATO, a fear sparked by President Trump's repeated threats to weaken or walk away from the transatlantic alliance that has protected Europe for almost 8 decades. Yeah, so, what's the interesting thing is I remember the Cold War. I'm of that age where I remember where we would do drills in school, duck and cover, get underneath your desk because the bomb is coming. I remember the film The Day After. It was a movie made for television that came on prime time. It was super duper hyped up. Everyone was watching it. Back then, you only had like 8 channels, so it was just a thing. And it was the aftermath of a thermonuclear destruction around the world, putting us into a dystopian society and what the world could look like. Only to find out that the power of the bombs that were in place at the time, this came out, if I had to guess, I'd say I can look it up. I'll look it up here in a second. In the mid-'80s, I think. I'm going to look it up here. The Day After movie. I mean, this scared the living mess out of most of us. Came out in 1983. And this particular film was nothing close to what a real nuclear war would look like. Then you had movies like War Games with Matthew Broderick, that this story of a kid who was a hacker. He hacked into, I think, NORAD, which is a defense company or department that basically covers the North Atlantic thermonuclear launches and notifies the rest of us when a nuclear bomb is coming. It monitors airspace and all that. And therefore, he finds this situation where he taps into it and changes some settings. And next thing you know, we're almost at nuclear war. So those kind of movies were going on all the time. And so I remember the Cold War and stuff like Red Dawn, the original with Patrick Swayze, those guys. So we, Generation X, we knew about this. We lived through it. And so the threat of that and nuclear annihilation was real. We were only about 20 years removed. 20 years, because the Cuban Missile Crisis was in 1962. This is about 21 years later, the movie The Day After. So 20 years is nothing. Now, I don't remember it because I wasn't alive, but the air, the culture was centered around a thermonuclear destruction by way of Russia. And Russia was looked at the big bad guy. You had the 1980 Olympics where the United States beat Russia in the for the semifinals, but they beat them and went on to win the gold medal. But beating the Russians, and you had the boycott from Carter, and I think that was so the Olympics was that was Lake Placid, that was in the winter, and then I think Carter boycotted the Moscow games the following summer. I think that back then they were the same year. So back then, the summer and the Olympics in the winter were the same year. And so then you had a situation with Russia or the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, and then President Carter, pulling out our Olympic participants from the Moscow Olympics. So there's a lot of tension going on, a lot of tension. That's my whole point. Then you had Reagan come in, and you had the whole Gorbachev deal, and you had a bunch of things happening. Then the wall and other stuff. Tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev. And so NATO was important because it was an absolute deterrent from a nuclear war. I would agree with that, and I would think maybe to a lesser degree the UN was too. But once the wall came down in the early 90s, it was a situation where the Soviet Union was broken apart into various different countries, and there was opportunity there for peace. But in my personal opinion, I don't believe that the NATO alliance wanted to keep that peace, because I feel strongly that the military-industrial complex was in place to continue on what they're doing, continue on having threats of war, continuing on having the need for continual weapons upgrades and bases and military personnel and proxy wars to keep this stuff up, to prop this stuff up, to put people in place to continue on this threat that I don't believe was quite there as it was before. I just don't think it was, especially looking back at it now. And so here we are now, we're dealing with a situation with the NATO alliance with a Russia who has told the alliance that we do not want you guys to incur further east into our territory. We do not want Ukraine, which is on our border, to be part of NATO. But what did you find coming up to where we are now? When you had Obama in office, then you had Trump, nothing happened then. Then you had, Obama, then Trump, then Biden. In the 8 years under Obama and then the 4 years under Biden, you saw massive movement to the east towards Russia, putting it into a very, very dangerous situation where you put these powerful countries together, gaining power and encroaching on their border. And you were shocked to see Putin march into Ukraine not long after our embarrassing exit from Afghanistan. I mean, personally, again, I'm not trying to vouch for Putin, but if it was me, I mean, this was, to me, if it was me, it would just be a preemptive measure to protect my area and to protect my borders. You saw in the 7th Day War or 6th Day War, whatever it was, Israel had their enemies. I think we're talking about Egypt, and if I had correct, was it Syria or was it Lebanon? I don't remember which countries it were. It was definitely Egypt. But Israel, even though they were being lied to, that there was no threat against them, never mind that there are tanks being massed at their border in the Sinai, they said, you know what, we're going to do a preemptive strike, because that's what it is. So that's a viable military measure. And so, given the activity that NATO did, one could argue, and I would even argue that Russia's invasion into Ukraine was a justified measure for their national security. It is what it is. And the point I'm making is that was pushed forth by NATO. Had they not done anything at all, I don't think they would have done anything, personally. I just don't. I could be wrong. And we'll never know. But now, with the U.S. being forced to back a war in Ukraine, which they were largely responsible for under Obama, under Biden, they were largely responsible for. I don't know about Clinton, maybe so, maybe Bush W. And so now Trump's like, look, we're done with this. No more wars. Let's end this thing. No more deaths, no more destruction, and no more tying into this complex, which is doing nothing more with upholding and uplifting a system of continual wars all the time, because it just means more power, more money for the globalists. That's really what it comes down to. And so if Trump says, we're not going to do it, then what is the EU going to do? Well, are they going to say, well, we're not going to worry about it. We will step back and we'll assess the situation. We won't expand because we need United States in our corner. So how about we just chill and come up with a reasonable, peaceful situation here with Ukraine and force Ukraine to come to the negotiating table, right? Or they can double down, back Ukraine, and say, you know what, we don't need the U.S. Let's pony up and let's give them the money they need. And all that's going to do is embolden Russia for further conflict. That's all it's going to do. And I don't see how we can prevent war at this point, or further expansion of war. And with military bases of Americans in all over Europe, what are we going to do? Are we going to, if our bases get attacked, even though we're not initially engaged, we're going to have to retaliate some ways. So I don't know if we can get out there fast enough, get out of the situation fast enough before this thing blows up in our faces, blows up in their faces. But let's keep going here. I'm going to read this again. See if there's anything more here to talk about in this particular piece, because I do find it, like I said, very, very, in some ways, frightening. So it says here, concern has grown in European quarters, not only due to the White House Ukraine policies, but given that close Trump advisor Elon Musk had said this earlier this month. And by the way, talking about Elon Musk, we have to talk about the situation where the New York Times came out with a bogus article with 5 so-called sources saying that Elon Musk's visit to the Defense Department was a part of a plan for war with China. We'll get into that in a second, of how the media just does nothing but lie. All they want to do is just, try to chip away at Trump's popularity. And it's disgusting. And we'll talk about that later. But I thought about that just now, seeing this in this particular article. So billionaire Elon Musk threw his weight behind a U.S. exit from NATO, saying on the social media platform that it, quote, doesn't make sense for America to pay for the defense of Europe, unquote. The senior advisor to the U.S., President Donald Trump, was responding to a post on X early Sunday that asserted the U.S. should, quote, end NATO now, unquote. I agree. You're not going to force our hand. You're not going to tell us that we have to spend money to a country, which, by the way, is not spending it wisely, or giving equipment to a country who, by the way, are not using that equipment wisely. We're hearing reports of these equipment that we're giving to them and material that we're giving to Ukraine is ending up in Mexico for the cartels, ending up all over the world, ending up in every other place that is not where it needs to be. So we're not going to do that, continue on, and deal with a country that is laundering money left and right, is corrupt as heck, and we're seeing people's lives lost, and eventually we're going to see it, hopefully not, but President Zelensky even said that you're going to have to send your sons and daughters to die in Ukraine. And I'm sorry, we're not with it. We're not with that. And Elon Musk is dead on, because we're not going to have our hands forced. We'll work with you. We'll deal with you. We'll get, you passed up on the mineral deal, which would have given you security for having us on site mining. We get money out of that. We have people on site, meaning that Russia won't attack because we're there in a non-combative mission. You didn't want that. And then he's turning down this nuclear plant deal as well as an alternative to that. So I think what happened with him, or Zelensky, is that he ended up getting backing from the EU, which, by the way, I'm not sure how they're going to pay for it. I'm not sure they thought this all the way through. But if the United States stands firm on this, I don't see this anything more. But that's that. So here, are we still on? Make sure I'm still on. Right, microphone's still there. something that can continue on. So let me continue on in this article and let's wrap this up. Quote, we really should, quote unquote, the Tesla Incorporated co-founder and chief executive officer said. On March 3rd, Musk wrote on X, he agreed with a suggestion by a conservative commentator that the U.S. should leave NATO and the United Nations. If not NATO, definitely the United Nations. They are utterly worthless. And this sentiment was quickly seconded by some Republicans in Congress. Representative Thomas Massey, who was the only one to vote against the continuing resolution bill, who said on X that, quote, NATO is a Cold War relic that needs to be relegated to a talking kiosk at the Smithsonian, unquote. And Utah Representative Mike Lee as well said if the U.S. withdrew from NATO, Europe would have to fund more of its own security needs, forcing it to choose between security and socialism. And he's right there 100%. And all he's basically saying is that these countries don't use their military spending. Well, they use what they would have used for military spending on social programs for their country. So one of the reasons why these countries have all this free healthcare and free whatever they have, so-called free, is because they aren't funding their own defense. They're relying on us. So they take all that money that they would be spending on their healthcare and Social Security and all that stuff, and they're putting it into that social services. And so if they decide that the U.S. is no longer if we decide that we're no longer going to be in there and they're going to continue on funding these wars, then they're going to have to determine what's more important. You know, the actual well-being in terms of social services and programs for our citizens, because we don't have a truly capitalistic society like they do in America, or we're just going to tell them to kick bricks and we're going to go ahead and fund these wars and you just have at it. So not sure how it's going to work out for them, but we will see. Recently, Francis Macron has floated the possibility of extending France's nuclear deterrent over the continent. France remains the only EU country that possesses nuclear weapons. Oh, because Great Britain's not part of the EU anymore. So France remains the only EU country that possesses nuclear weapons. Okay. All this comes as Bloomberg is freshly reporting that NATO will ask Europe and Canada to boost its weapons and equipment stockpiles by 30%. So this is just, to me, this is just dumb. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's short-sighted, and I don't get it. So let me see if there's anyone in here who is actually. I didn't put the comments up. Let me put the live chat up. Okay. Kim Court says, "Happy Friday, front Canada." I'm sorry. Happy Friday from Canada. Great. Thanks to Kim. Pretty much. Thank you for that. So one more thing I want to tell you guys. I'm glad this actually works, because one thing that we've done recently is we have we're no longer using StreamYard, which is our former tool that we use for streaming. And because it doesn't talk well and play well with Rumble or Locals for that matter, we decided to go to Rumble Studio and start using that. And this feature here was not there before, I don't believe. The same feature that StreamYard had, which allows us to put the comments on the screen. Before it would put them on the side. It didn't look really well, but I like this feature here. So thank you, Kim, for that. If you have comments, put them in here. So that means that everyone, if you're on Facebook, Rumble, if you're on X, it'll all show now. Whereas before, it would only show Facebook and YouTube. That's it. So now it's showing YouTube as well, which is fantastic. And StreamYard didn't play well with the platform that we want to go with. YouTube just wasn't cutting it, and Facebook wasn't cutting it too. They're still putting in restrictions for us, and we decided that if we want to see real growth with this particular company we have here, this media outlet that we have here, we're going to have to put most of the focus on Rumble and less on YouTube. YouTube's still going to have a major place here, but for the next, for the foreseeable future, we're going to be focusing on Locals and Rumble. And while I'm mentioning that right now, I'm going to jump over to Rumble and show you how that looks. So let me do that right now. So here's Rumble here. And see, if you see this join button right here, this is what we're talking about. So if you were a member before, if you were on this channel and you were on YouTube and your name is listed here up top, let me move this banner out of the way so you can see it. I want you to consider coming over to Locals, and you do the same thing you would in YouTube. Come over to Locals and hit join. From there, we'll bring you to a page like this. And in this particular paywall, we have a bunch of articles. Right now, we have 167 posts. We just put one up a few days ago. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment, that particular article, as it relates to the Department of Education, which is a utter disaster, which hopefully will be a whole new way of not only educating our kids, and not even a whole new way, because this has actually been in place prior to 79, but going back to the way of classical education, going back to the Enlightenment period and the founders back in the late 18th century, how Jefferson and Franklin in particular, how these guys, Madison, these guys, how they saw education as a duty from God, as a duty to God, to teach our children to grow up, to learn the things they should learn, and to love the things they should love, and to reject the things that they shouldn't love. In other words, choosing the right ideas, choosing the right value systems, choosing the right art and poetry and literature and science. When I mean right, I mean in terms of edifying, not something that's going to be destructive. This is a classical style education. But what happened was, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but we'll talk about this here in a second. But essentially, when the 1979 creation of the Department of Education happened under President Carter, and we'll find out why, we lost all of that. And instead of raising kids to be enlightened people who are expressing themselves, to improve themselves, to love the things they should love from a moral standpoint, they are activists for a state that they have to defend because that's who's running the show. And they've been brainwashed to do that. So we're going to talk about that here in a second. In fact, let's just jump right into it right now. I have it right here. I'm going to go ahead and put it up here on the screen. And here's the article right here. It's entitled, Trump Moves to Dismantle the Department of Education, Empowering Parents and States. We put this out a couple of days ago, actually put it out yesterday. And it's just an interesting deal here. So our staff put this together, and it's, again, it goes into what I was saying. It goes way beyond just Doge or saving money or anything of that nature. Even more so, like I said, in terms of how we teach our kids, but it's also dealing with fairness when it comes to the states and how the Constitution doesn't give the power to the federal government to tell the states how they can do the education system. In fact, the 10th Amendment basically said, if it's not explicitly written in the Constitution, the rights therefore go out to the states. So in this particular article, it says here, in a move that has sent shockwaves through Washington, President Trump has signed an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education, DOE, a federal agency that has long overstepped its constitutional boundaries and failed the American people. Critics are panicking, but the reality is this. Education was never meant to be controlled by Washington. Never was. And the DOE was never about kids. This is the clinker here. I mean, we heard President Trump talk about this before, about how we spend the most money on education, but we have one of the worst education system or educated kids in the world. We spend the most and have the worst results. And there's a saying, as you all heard, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results. But again, the point is, this was never about the kids. So I kind of jumped the lead there, but I'm going to reiterate what I said before. But here's what I meant by that. Said that the Department of Education was created in 1979 by President Jimmy Carter, not because of any urgent need for federal oversight, but to secure support from the teachers' unions in its effort to be reelected. It was a political maneuver, not an educational reform. In fact, the Department of Education Organization Act, the actual foundation documents, explicitly states, and I'm going to quote here, it's here on the screen. The establishment of the Department of Education shall not increase the authority of the federal government over education or diminish the responsibility for education, which is reserved to the states, 10th Amendment, and the local school systems and other instrumentalities of the states, unquote. Now, this is 1979. So people are still dealing with like, okay, we understand what communism is. We understand what socialism is. We aren't down with that. I know it's, modern era 79, but they're not quite there yet, right? And so what we have in place right now would not have passed the muster if people thought that the Department of Education would be what it is now. The act also claims that the department was meant to, quote, protect the rights of the state and local governments and public and private educational institutions and improve the control of such governments and institutions over their own educational programs and policies, unquote. So we're going to protect the states and local governments to allow them to do what they want in private educational institutions and improve their control of such governments and institutions over their own educational programs and policies. What we're finding out now is that the government tells them what to do, and if you don't do it, they're going to dock your pay, dock your money. So I'm going to keep going here. So, and yet since its creation, the DOE has done the exact opposite. It has centralized power, dictated curriculum, and manipulated funding to push in ideological agendas, stripping states, parents, and local communities of the authority that was promised to them. Since the DOE took control, test scores have plummeted. We mentioned that. Student achievement has stagnated, and spending has skyrocketed. Also mentioned that. The U.S. spends more per student than almost any other country, yet American students rank embarrassingly low in math, reading, and science. Everything else is going great, I guess, compared to their international peers. So wasting billions of taxpayers' money, stuff like CRT, gender theory, DEI, turning schools into Marxist indoctrination centers rather than places of learning. As I said before, this is getting into what I was telling you before about the classical style of education. This comes from Professor C.S. Lewis, who warned in his own book, The Abolition of Man, that modern education would stop teaching students how to seek truth, wisdom, and virtue. Instead, it would train them to be activists, loyal only to the state and its latest ideological obsession. This is exactly what happened under DOE's reign. Instead of focusing on math, science, reading, and history, our schools have been transformed into factories that churn out students who know more about intersectionality and protest tactics than basic U.S. civics. Ain't that the truth? And one more thing, if I can just sidebar here. I've been watching a lot of videos now. I'll give a shout out to this channel. It's called Midwest Safety. It's a YouTube channel dealing with petty arrests, petty crimes. And so it's not heavy, not some of these ones that deal with murder or anything like that. But what's interesting is you see these driving under the influence stops, or you'll find something like someone at a pool party, they're too loud, and the establishment tells them to leave. They won't leave. They're trespassing. And so then in either case, the police officer gives these people instructions and they just lose it. Okay, for me growing up, when I got pulled over, it's my hands are on 10 and 2. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Whatever. Oh, yeah, you want my license? Right here in my driver's license, my hand's here. I'm putting it into the glove box. I'm pulling out my my registration. Here you go, officer. My driver's license is in my pocket. I'm reaching for my pocket. All right, I got my wallet. Here it is. I'm opening my wallet. Here you go, officer. Thank you very much. That was what we were told to do. Not just black, not just white, everyone with common sense, because they had weapons and they are of an authority figure. Growing up, we respected the police. We respected our parents for the most part. Some of us didn't, but for the most part, we did. We respected the fire department. We respected our teachers and principals for the most part. And so authority was respected. I can say pretty much that no one growing up in my generation felt entitled. I was at a private school. Some of the kids did. They were rich. Some of the parents had some big businesses. But for the most part, from my experience, from an anecdotal standpoint, there was some arrogance there, but it was nothing like I see now with people with half what they had. People with a pot to piss in feels like they want to act like they own the world. And they don't want to listen to their instruction. And I just sent a message to a friend of mine. She just texted me back here. She's into cops and all that stuff too. I sent a message to her today. I said, hey, is it just me, or is it these people, this generation, are they entitled brats, or are you seeing that the fact that they're always asking for, let's say, all right, so here's how it typically goes. Here's how it typically goes. So, all right, so I'm speeding. Okay, I'm speeding. Or maybe I'm doing, let's say I'm doing 40 in a 25. That's bad. That's too low. I'd probably go to jail for that. Let's say I'm going 81 in a 60, right? Something like that. 20 miles over the speed limit. Or let's just say this. Let's say I'm going 81 in a 70. All right, that's 11 miles over. You get stopped, you can get points, the whole nine. So typically, if something like that, it's going to be a ticket, a pretty heavy ticket at that matter. You're stopped over, pull over for maybe a half hour after they run your tags and see if you have any warrants or anything. Personally, I've never had any warrants. So for me, it would be just me sitting there and chilling, waiting for them to come back, get a ticket, and that's it. You're off on your way. But here's what typically happens in a situation like that. Sir, license and registration. What are you stopping me for? What are you stopping me for? Sir, license and registration, please. You don't have to go through all that. So what do you need? Where's your officer? Where's your sergeant? Are you harassing me? Whatever. I'm not how to give you that to you. And before you know it, they escalate it. And then the officer says, okay, we'll get out of the car. They won't do that. So then they say, after about repeated warnings, we're going to smash the glass and pull you out of there. And of course that happens. And then they're thrown on the ground, and then they put the cuffs on them, and they're screaming and crying, complaining about how tight the cuffs are. And if it's a female on the ground, they're going to say, well, you can't pat me down because you need a woman cop to do it. And then they'll say, okay, well, I did nothing wrong. Why are you doing this to me? They'll say, give me your sergeant. Oh, you hurt my shoulder. Let me have an ambulance. And the officers are saying, it's almost like they have to do this. They have to, get the ambulance for them, get the sergeant on the phone for them, accommodate. And then they'll even say, yeah, we're going to sue you for this because this, and that. But the whole time, all of this is on body camera. And I'm watching this stuff, and it's just unbelievable. And I can't help but think that we've raised a generation that, number one, feels entitled, feels they're way more important than they are. Number 3, have no respect for authority. Number 4, feel that they can, in doing so, sue, complain, talk their way out of. And number 5, be a victim. Oh, you're a victim. And number 6, always forget that they're the ones that started it. You know, and it's like, and then a lot of them then will resist. They'll get another charge, or they'll do something stupid and get another charge. So what would have been $100 ticket turns into assaulting a police officer violently or non-violently, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct maybe. And now you're looking at, a year or extensive probation. So to me, when I watch this stuff on TV, I took the time to do that because I'm thinking about this article here about how we're raising a group of activists. And again, I mean, what I see now on TV now, on even on cops, going back to the 90s, you did not see that on cops. You did not see it. First of all, there were no cell phones back then when they first came out in the 90s. People had more respect even back then. And they just basically talked their way into jail. Oh, yes, officer, I don't really have that much weed in my pocket. They'll just talk their way into jail, and it was funny. Cops generally, it was a funny show. I mean, it's not funny to see people get arrested, but it's sort of kind of when they talk their way into jail on dumb stuff. But this stuff now, this new school stuff we're seeing now in the last 5-6 years is absolutely insane. I recommend you check this channel out, Midwest Safety. The profanity is blocked out. It gets a little violent, but not too violent. It's not over the top. It's not one of some of these other shows that show shootings, like that. So it's fairly family friendly. But I guess the lesson here is that the generations have actually changed, and the entitlement is at another level. So getting back to this, the states themselves don't have control over their education. They should be able to fund their own schools instead of relying on federal money with strings attached. Because simple as this, if a school decides they want to do a curriculum that doesn't involve CRT, doesn't involve DEI, doesn't involve intersectionality, or whatever, then the government, especially under Biden, would say, you know what? We're going to pull your funding. That's not freedom. That is a tyrannical measure that's imposed by the state. And because the kids have been indoctrinated through their entire lives that everyone must get a trophy, that the government or the authority that's above you doesn't really matter. You can protest all you want and you can get your results you want. You can sue, whatever, because you're special. Then all of a sudden, you have a situation where the kids are not getting educated at all. They're in fact getting indoctrinated. So educational freedom is what this is really about. And that's essentially what Trump ran on. He ran on educational freedom, medical freedom, financial freedom, and individual freedom in terms of, in general. And that's essentially what he ran on. The Democrats in general, the socialists, the rhinos who have helped him along in back behind the scenes, have enabled the government to go roughshod over the American people and trample all over our individual liberties, which were given to us by God and should never be taken from us. And they rewrite all that stuff by revisionist ideology that the state has control over us, that the state has control over your kids, that the individual parent does not have the rights of the child. The state has the rights of the child. And that's a pervasive attitude that's all over Europe. If you have that attitude that the state has access to the child, well, guess what? If you have a speeding ticket and the government thinks that's a problem, then, well, obviously you're an unfit parent because you are driving too fast. And because your son was in the car, you were doing 11 miles over the speed limit, we're going to take your child from you. Now, of course, that hasn't happened, but that it could. It's a slippery slope. And if you give them the ability, I guarantee you they would do that. So here's how this is what the left's true fear really is. It ultimately comes down to losing money, and power too. But this is how it works in terms of the real reason why the left is panicking. Because DOE, the Department of Education, is a massive money laundering operation for the Democratic Party. Here's how it works. Your tax dollars go to fund the Department of Education. Then the DOE sends billions to universities and public schools, particularly for DEI, CRT, and left-wing wacky initiatives. Thirdly, the university faculty, who overwhelmingly donate to Democrat politicians, receive this money. And four, the money cycles right back into Democrat campaigns, securing their power. So by dismantling the DOE, Trump is cutting off one of the biggest financial pipelines that fuels left-wing policies. So in other words, Trump's executive order to dismantle the Department of Education is a victory for the Constitution, for parents, and for the future of American children. The DOE has spent decades failing students, undermining local control, and turning schools into activist factories. And we see that. I mean, this all makes sense now. In 1979, Jimmy Carter, essentially with the help of the teachers' unions and of a false pretext, we said it before, how it was never in their purview to do that. They were established that they shall not increase the authority of the federal government over education or diminish their responsibility for education. And they would protect the rights of the states and local governments and public and private education institutions. So they're not going to interfere in what they have to say and do in terms of their curriculums. That's a lie. So under a false pretense, they did all of this, and they created at least 2 generations of activists. And it's only a miracle that we have people that have common sense enough to understand that. And I think through overreach and through the effects of the poor policies of everything that they agree with in terms of globalism, open borders, illegal immigration, crime, inflation, shipping our jobs and manufacturing overseas, weakening our US dollar by printing money, and then trying to figure out why people can no longer afford a Big Mac. A Big Mac is now like $8 now in some places, like California, or I'm sorry, Hawaii. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So the White House put out this last statement here that President Trump is improving education outcomes by empowering parents, states, and communities. Quote, we're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, unquote. By restoring power to the states, parents, and local communities, this move will allow schools to focus on real education again, not political indoctrination. It's time to raise a generation of children who seek knowledge, truth, and excellence rather than one trained to blindly serve the state. Yes, and another thing about all of this is that it's very, very important for kids to understand that being an American citizen, being someone who is a citizen of the U.S., comes with responsibility to love your God, love your country, love your family, in any order you want there, and to be a citizen who is productive, who looks out for his or her neighbor, and contributes and seeks those things that he or she should seek, loves the things that he or she should love. And that is a moral basis, a moral fabric, which is what this country was actually founded on. And we'll get into some of that when we go to our last segment here, dealing with the social media posts, because in there, we're going to learn a little bit about how Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson felt about this country and what they wanted this country to look like in terms of its presidential seal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a clip here. And this actually, I think I lost the clip. Let me see if I can find it. It's still here. So I'm going to share this particular clip here. And this is a clip with Newt Gingrich, one of my favorite pundits. He ran for president in, wow, he ran with Herman Cain. That was that was McCain. So that would have been Obama's second term. So 2012. He was the Speaker of the House in 1994. And he was one of the greatest speakers in this country's history. The Republicans regained the House after a long drought. I believe it was during the FDR years, maybe a little before that, where the Republicans lost the Congress, and in 94, the Republicans won it back, primarily with a Reagan youth movement that had really taken wave in the California days when he was governor. People think that the Reagan thing was the Reagan wave, or the Reaganism culture spike was when he was president. It really wasn't. It was really when he was in Hollywood and a governor in California, because he was so pro-America, so anti-communism, and his message resonated to young people who saw a government that was corrupt and wanted control over that and wanted control with their futures. And it was that generation that grew up in 94 to vote the Democrats out and brought Newt Gingrich in. And he has a lot to say about this. So he's a historian. He and his wife write books. I have several of his books about the Revolutionary War and Gettysburg and Civil War and so forth. So that's him here. We'll hear what he has to say as he talks about Elon Musk and these Tesla protests, as it goes into what we said before about this generation of raising activists because of this lack of classical styled education.
Reaction, Fox News contributor, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. If you're nice to me, I'll let you drive my new Tesla.
I'm with her. I think a Cybertruck would really have been you. You could have put Sean on the side of it.
Oh, is that what I should put? So that what then I become the target. Thank you very much. I just like fast cars. What can I tell you? But all right. So you see all of this happening. You have discussed that they're the party of crazy. Hakeem Jeffrey says, well, we got the Republicans on the run. I'll get into this in more detail. Republicans on the run. Did we see them on the run last Tuesday night? What did you see Tuesday night?
Look, I think that everything you showed earlier reflects what Lincoln said at Gettysburg when he said this is a test of whether this system or any system so conceived in liberty can survive. You have a hardline group who believe that they have the right to be violent, that they have the right to deny the American people the law. You have to enforce the law. Period. And at some point, people that you can't wage war. Elon Musk is simply one of the people serving the American people. He's a senior advisor to the President of the United States. And I think that in that sense, all of this is unacceptable, as is around the President and his 3-year-old. What I saw the other night is, Calista and I were there when the...
So let me stop here. So he framed that very well. So essentially, this whole thing with Tesla, I mean, it's ridiculous. So here you have a guy who owns only a part of the company. I mean, I think he owns the most of it, but it's owned by a super majority of people. And you have people like Tim Walz, who's the governor of Minnesota, talking about how he's so excited that the stock is going down and that he's happy about it. And you have people like this Crockett chick who is talking about on her birthday going out to protest for Tesla and take down Tesla and all this stuff. not understanding how corporations work, especially ones that are publicly traded. That wishing a company to go down, especially one the size of Tesla, is betting against America. And it's short-sighted, it's ignorant, it just adds to the notion that you can't be taken seriously, and it adds to the notion that you are anti-American, and it increases Elon Musk's popularity in a way that I'm sure they don't really see because they're just so blind with hatred.
President spoke to the Congress. We were actually sitting directly above the House Democrats, and I wrote at Gingrich 360 a newsletter describing them, saying that the House Democrats were sort of zombie Democrats. They couldn't applaud anything. They couldn't applaud the president. They couldn't applaud a 13-year-old cancer survivor. They couldn't applaud a young man who wanted to go to West Point. They couldn't applaud people who were there who had lost loved ones. It was pretty bizarre. And I think that, Hakeem Jeffries may think, look, he has to say these things. He's their leader. The fact is, the Democrats currently have no solutions. They are so enraged that Trump is actually changing what overwhelmingly Americans believe is a corrupt system. And I'll just give you one piece of data. Our majority did a poll cut yesterday. 82% of the American people believe the system is corrupt. Now, that's dangerous for the survival of freedom, but also it tells you the Democrats who want to defend the bureaucracy and the waste, they're going to have a big mountain to climb come 2026.
Yeah, they're going to have a big mountain to climb.
And another clip he was talking about, and I think I won't try and bring it up. I'll speak for him here. I'll let him finish out here. I'm not sure if he has time to finish the point that I wanted to hear, because it might be in another clip. But what he was saying was that there is a way that the Congress can check the judicial branch constitutionally. And Kim, you're from Canada, so I'm not sure if you understand how this particularly works, but the U.S. has three branches of government. We have an executive branch, which is headed up by the President of the United States. The Constitution says that executive branch should be vested in the president. So that person has the power, I would say plenary or ultimate authority over that particular branch. The second one would be the Congress, which has two parts. An upper house, which is called the Senate, and a lower house, which is called the House of Representatives. The lower house is control of the budget for the most part. It's a much bigger portion. It's represented by population. So the bigger your state, the more representative you will have. And the Senate, the upper house, is let's say it's the HR of the Congress. They handle personnel issues, confirmations, that sort of thing, judges, and they have other powers as well. But there are only 50 of those, 2 per state. And then lastly, you have your judicial branch, which is headed up by the Supreme Court. Below that, you have appellate courts, district courts, and so forth, down and on down. So as a situation happens in a court, it can be appealed on up from local all the way up to the Supreme Court, where that's the final stop. The buck stops there. And so what we've come to now, the initial thought was, if you look at the initial documents, which are the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, those papers were pretty clear that the judicial branch was the weakest of the three. In fact, the Congress would be the strongest branch because they're the closest to the people. And then the executive branch would be after that because he or she enforces the laws that are created by the Congress. And then lastly, you have the judicial branch, which some people say is to interpret the law, but it's not really so much that. It's a check against the congressional in terms of their laws that they make. But the decisions that they rule on can be checked by the Congress. And I'm sorry, the judicial branch can check to some level the executive branch, but not at the level of of upending executive command. So if a president has a executive branch or a cabinet or agency within his executive branch, he has or she has that right to do whatever he or she wants to do within that particular branch. Outside of that, there's more scrutiny, and the judicial branch can come in and make rulings against it if they feel it's unconstitutional. Fine, but it all works together. Every branch can check each one. Congress can make a law, but the president can veto it, meaning I don't care if you have 100% votes, the president with one vote can veto it, and then that's a check against Congress and vice versa. So it works that way. So what we haven't seen much of is a check against the judicial branch. And as far as I know, and I'm not an expert here, if you know of a better way that this is, let me know. But constitutionally, the Congress can check or make sure that the judicial branch does not get to be too powerful. And one of the three ways that I know of is one is they can actually remove courts. So if you have a district judge somewhere who says, I think every person in America needs to wear blue jeans on Friday, and he makes other stuff like that, they could say, you know what? Why are we spending money on this particular court? Let's just get rid of it. That's number one. Number two, they could actually, they can impeach that justice or judge. What's the third way I'm thinking about? I can't think of it now. Oh, they can actually, so they can remove it, and then they can impeach that person or kick them out. That's a little harder to do. And then they can just defund it, right? They can just stop funding money. So you have the court in place, the judge is in place, but he or she has nothing to do because there's no money in the coffers to do anything. So that's what needs to happen. And in the clip that I saw with Newt Gingrich, he actually said that. So let's keep going. If he doesn't say it, it's fine because I just said it.
Do you think, holding up their bingo paddles and not staying for moms that lost their children, or a 12-year-old young man that lost, that won his battle with cancer and became a Secret Service agent, all the other people that were honored? The American people see that. How do they react to that? Because that is soulless. You have to. I can't imagine if you have a heart, mind, conscience, and soul, you'd ever act that way. And not one of them stood. Nobody clapped. They just
he's
listened
referring to the joint session speech that Trump did a few weeks ago.
Leadership. You were in the room.
Look, I had the opposite experience. I was the Speaker of the House sitting behind Bill Clinton when he got up in '96 and said, the era of big government is over. Now, I had to stand up and applaud. I mean, how can you not applaud that if you're a conservative?
You're right.
And so in all the years I went, whether it was Reagan, Carter, George H.W., Clinton, in all the time I went, I don't remember Republicans ever failing to stand for the president. And I think to not do that begins to show
and I think what we saw, I don't play that music because it's copyrighted. I think what we saw, just to segue back into what we said before, is that the classical style of education prior to 1979 was gone from 79 till today. And it'll probably stay that way until this really kicks in. So, because that was gone, because we've raised a couple generations, maybe three, of activists, they're all grown up now. And some of them are in Congress. Some of them are judges. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a bunch of toddlers running around who are whining, just like those police officers experienced in that YouTube channel I just mentioned before. Whining, complaining, and then getting thrown out of the car, put on the ground, handcuffed, and then they're complaining. And then guess what? They're claiming victimhood. Then they're, lashing out. Then they're threatening to sue. And they're blaming the person because if I'm a woman, I can't be patted down by a man. So you watch these police arrests, especially on the ones that are really petty. I'm talking about the ones that don't involve real jail time, and what you see is a small microcosm of what we're seeing now politically. We're seeing people who are attacked. We see people who are doing something wrong. They get caught. They blame. They deny. They lie. They slash out. They get violent at times. And then when the hammer comes down, like it is now, they get mad at the cops, yell at the cops, scream at the cops, hit the cops sometimes. And then when that gets shut down, they end up claiming being victimhood and threatening lawsuits and suing because you didn't give me, the proper headroom when I got pushed into the police car, even though I was jumping up and down. Or, oh no, I just heard George Foreman just died. Sorry, just breaking news, guys. Just came across. Oh, it's sad. Wow, it's sad. Okay, so this is the first live story I've had to talk about. Wow. All right, so if you guys aren't familiar with George Foreman, he's an awesome guy. Man, that's oof. That hurts, man. That really hurts. All right, we'll talk about George Foreman. What we'll do here's what we'll do. If you're a member of Locals, we will jump over on Locals after this and talk about George Foreman. I'll see if I can get Greg on board. Let me text him right now. Are you free later for a private 30-minute dialogue? If not, we'll do it tomorrow. I'm typing this here. If not, tomorrow. Sorry, guys. This is breaking news. I'm sorry. I'll leave it there for now. All right. So where was I? Yeah. So the cops and all that stuff is just the economy of what we're seeing now, and they're suing. And it's the exact same thing we're seeing now. And the last thing I'll say is this: is that when the bad guys get caught by the cops, they're always yelling at the cops. I hate the cops. I hate you. Blah 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 blah. I didn't do anything. This isn't right. I'm going to sue you. It's the same thing we're seeing with the appellate courts and the judges, because this is really all the left has. And if you want to truly drain the swamp, this is how it looks. As painful and as frustrating as it is, this is how it looks. And I always have said it's going to take at least 12 years of a contiguous MAGA, strong, agenda to make this thing really solidify. Because in 12 years, you have a codified generation that have come up, seen the results, and now they're going to have their marching orders. And 12 years of no Department of Education, 12 years of a 1776 curriculum, a classical style education, a Pledge of Allegiance education, a no CRT, DEI, intersectionality curriculum, a God-fearing curriculum where we do a balanced approach on creation and evolution. You can teach them both. I have a problem teaching both. Just if you teach evolution, just make sure you actually use facts that are facts and have not been disproven. A lot of times you see evolution is actually taking stuff that's been disproven. like Piltdown Man. You know, I can go on about that. But nevertheless, a education where people are encouraged to think logically, critically, and have reason. I think in 12 years, you have a really sound generation that's been reinforced through government, that has not interfered with them, that's lowered their taxes, that's given them opportunity to excel, which, by the way, I want to talk about Walt Disney here in a second here, because there's a launch of Snow White today. I want to play a quick clip from Jack Prosbo on Walt Disney, which just basically floored me. But it plays into what I'm just saying here. I think we'll be in good shape. Okay, so now, guys, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share this screen here, and I'm going to pull up this particular video, which I just find just incredible. So this is Jack Prosevic. He's a conservative pundit, and he's talking about the rise of Disney and how Walt Disney would have felt about this new Snow White. And let me set this up. So Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was, I believe it was the first feature-length animation in American history. It was, and still to me, it looks fabulous, especially the fact that it's hand-drawn and it was just done, I mean, frame by frame, detailed. If you look at Snow White's face and the movements, the motion capture, so to speak, still really, if you look at AI today, you'd be hard pressed to have that kind of fluidity. If you just look at it, it's just really, really well done. And it made them a lot of money. It put Walt Disney on the map. And it was based on a fairy tale. Snow White was called Snow White because she was white-skinned. That's not saying it's good, not saying it's bad. It's just what it was. And so we mentioned before that Rachel Zegler, I believe her name is playing Snow White, and they essentially changed the nature of it. They turned it into a feminist agenda, woke type of deal. How it is just not the story. Put it that way, not the story. And Rachel also made some bad comments in the media about Walt Disney and about how this Snow White and Seven Dwarfs is antiquated, not up to date. Basically, she was trashing it. And then her or her supporting actress, or at least the supporting actress, the lead actress is her, I guess. And she's in the movie with a woman named Gal Gadot or Gal Gadot. I still don't know how it's pronounced, but she's an Israeli. And they're having issues because Zegler is, pro-Hamas. Essentially, I'm sorry, that it seems the way that made way to me, that she's pro this Palestinian Hamas movement, and she's been talking derogatorily to Gal Gadot, and that's caused a problem too. So much so that they separated them, try to keep her quiet, scaled down the red carpet premiere, and got a bunch of shills in there to speak positively about the film before the Rotten Tomatoes was able to come out, which, by the way, the reviews are out, and it's terrible. So there's the setup, and here is Jack Prosevic talking to whomever this person is. But here we go.
Walt Disney, even a lot of people don't know this fact, but Walt Disney actually went to the U.S. House of Representatives and testified before the House Committee on Un-American Activities that communists were starting to take over Hollywood. The man literally went, you can pull up the testimony of this, like Walt Disney himself, it's totally been buried. This information, this hearing, it's on video too. There's a recording of it. Nobody ever talks about it, that he actually went in and said it started with the union. They would come into unions where the workers were, and then they would start spreading these, everything has to be equal, has to have equality. And he said, I can see it starting to come up. And he said, this is the opposite of American. American is about doing your best and then working your hardest and being rewarded for that. And he tried to, all through his life, impart those kind of ideals and those kind of values. Even when you look at a story like Pinocchio, right? We just showed Pinocchio. It's Jack recently, and again, it comes from an older Italian tale. But in Pinocchio, it's when he gives in to sin and vice and drinking and gambling and smoking and lying, obviously, that he becomes punished for doing those things and eventually turns into a donkey. But again, it's still imparting those good values, this sort of like whatever. It's the opposite. If you were the original Disney movie, that I feel like Walt Disney died, then more and more people and the families losing control. I'll talk about there's a huge, I would say, it didn't last forever because, you know, sort of in the early 2000s, there's this other like resurgence of Disney, and you get like Aladdin, The Lion King, Little Mermaid, you get the Disney Channel and all the great shows on there for kids. And so there was that moment where it resurged after Walt Disney left. Walt Disney, even a lot of people.
Okay, I saw that actually. And I told my wife before I saw that clip about 10 minutes before we went live tonight. And I told her that we're going to have to watch with our son all the Disney movies going back to Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Pinocchio, Dumbo, which, by the way, was pretty depressing. People don't understand how dark these films were. Bambi and on up to, I would probably say, let me see. I know WALL-E wasn't a Disney film. I think they bought Pixar after that, but WALL-E was a decent film. But all the animated ones for sure, minus some of the ones that he mentioned prior to The Great Mouse Detective, because they had kind of gone off on their way. But the point being, he made a really good point there. And they've become a shell of themselves. And so much so that I refuse to go there, spend money for them. Fortunately, we have the DVDs so we can watch it. But yeah, it's just really, 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 really crazy to think how that company has gone, and especially what they've done to Star Wars, what they've done to Indiana Jones, making him into some sort of effeminate pincushion, disgusting. How they just destroyed again Star Wars and everything about it, such that now it's actually losing money, losing value in terms of its brand. So yeah. Anyway, so let's go over some 5 takeaways from what Newt talked about in terms of the Democrats, that they're basically fueled by hate, not hope, and they show it on national TV. Newt Gingrich nailed it. This is a test of whether our constitutional system can survive this level of lawlessness. He mentioned the Gettysburg Address. Spot on. That the Gettysburg Address actually changed the narrative of the Civil War. It ceased to become a war of, well, it was always a war to keep the Union in place. It was always Union, but expanded the Union into being a union with no slavery. Democrats now refuse to clap for children, heroes, and grieving parents as their rage is so deep. This really isn't about Trump. It's about protecting the republic from radical activists in suits. And number 5, if this doesn't wake up moderates to independence, nothing will. Yeah, I mean, I will do another show on the actual optics and the polling that's come out on this. I saw a poll here that basically said from Rasmussen that, by the way, they do polling every day, that Elon Musk is more popular than Democrats, which isn't really shocking at all. So, all right. So with that, let's go to our last segment here. We're basically just going to go out and check my X and see if there's anything out there that is something worth going for. And remind you that I'm going to actually go out to locals after this and do a show or extend this broadcast, talk about George Foreman and my thoughts there. And we'll do that right after this. So if you are on locals, by all means, join us there. If not, you can sign up for free. Go to Rumble, go to join, and there just sign up. There's an option to sign up for free. If you decide that you want to actually pay, there's a promotion out there as well for 1 month free. I believe the promotional code is Brandon. Type in Brandon for the promotional code. You'll get locals. You'll get the full membership or the supporter level, and that'll be for free for 30 days. If it doesn't work, let me know. I will put it out there. But I checked the other day. I believe it still is there, and the promotional code is Brandon. If not, I will verify that in a second before I leave. I'll do it before I leave. So let's go over to X here, and let's show you this. And I want to talk about the things that have been going on that was not related to the three topics we talked about today. So that dog there is Larry Schreikart's dog. By the way, Larry Schreikart he follows us. He is a good dude. He's an author. He wrote a book called Dragon Slayers, The Six Presidents and the War with the Swamp. We're producing a 14-part video series about that, about the swamp and how it grew and how it became a monstrosity and how the last three presidents, including Trump, in his first term, weren't really that successful at getting rid of it. And I'm curious as to how he would rate him so far, even though it's only about a month and a half in. Unfair to do now, but he's at a much better pace than I believe he was before. I mean, he's really doing a lot to combat this. And I believe that the next level of attack has to be at the judicial level. And we have to get support from the Congress to either defund, to impeach, or to remove these activist judges and their districts or their, whatever they are, districts or courts. Because like Newt Gingrich said, I'll say it here again, that this isn't about Trump anymore. It's about protecting the republic from radical activists in suits. This is a test of whether or not our constitutional system can survive this level of lawlessness. All right, so here we go. Let's come down here. Yeah, we mentioned this, that this is a Tesla takedown organizers plan color revolution to kill brand and death spiral for investors of Tesla, which, by the way, I mentioned before that if you do that, you're taking down the country, because publicly held companies such that Tesla is taking down the pension funds of organizations and states like Minnesota, which Tim Walz, governor, failed to realize when he wished the downfall of Tesla. Talking about obtuse and being just totally just not understanding the room at all. Trump said that he was going to personally pay overtime to rescued astronauts. I watched the actual clip, if need be. So essentially, it looks like the astronauts who were rescued by Elon Musk this week, which is gone pretty much unreported, didn't get paid overtime at all. I mean, it was like they got paid like $1,040, I believe, or were they entitled to that? That can't be that much. They got paid very, very little. And so Trump said he'll pay out of his pocket if it doesn't get handled internally. I thought that's pretty much an awesome thing to do. This is the end of it, but this lady approached this guy on the subway and was calling him racist, even though he didn't look like a racist at all. I mean, I think he was Asian American or Native American or Hispanic American or whatever. He wasn't just a white guy. And he handled it pretty well on the subway. But then she literally chased him off the subway for his hat, and then she does a total face plant on the concrete, and now she's a meme for the century. So there she goes there. That was pretty awesome. Here go your judges here. This is from the Gateway Pundit. It appears that John Roberts, who basically gave a scathing report on, he didn't mention Trump by name, but essentially attacking the notion of impeaching judges. He went on the attack there and said something in a scathing, fairly historical opinion, which had nothing to do with a decision, just his opinion about that. And it was obviously about Trump. And so the Gateway Pundit, the investigative reporting team, found that he's caught in an elitist club of judges and lawyers in terms of a circle, which includes James Boasberg, who's the guy who wanted to turn the plane around from the Venezuelan and the MS-13 and the other gang, who from being deported to, I think it was El Salvador. And so that he's one. Barry Howell, Ahmet Mehta, and Kajini Brown Jackson, who's also on the Supreme Court. Which I don't know how she got on there because she doesn't even know what a woman is at all. DOJ charged 3 people in domestic terrorism. They're there on the screen, and they may face 20 years in prison. Trump said he wouldn't mind seeing them being put into that super jail in El Salvador. Yeah, we mentioned this before. This is what I was talking about. That Jefferson and Franklin wanted Moses on the U.S. seal. So instead of having the U.S. seal now is an eagle with his face to the right, I believe, facing olive branches, which is peace. And to his left, there's arrows signifying that we'll fight you, but we prefer peace. Well, they wanted it to look something differently. They wanted it to be a symbol of liberty and divine law with Moses on it, basically parting the Red Sea. And the quote would have been, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God," unquote. America's founding drew from scripture, seeing Moses as the model lawgiver for free people. The roots of our republic run deep in biblical truth. Now, I won't play this because it involves some language, but you can read it on the screen right there for you. Just pause and look at that. The Democrats of then and Democrats of now, they haven't changed. The parties have not changed. And let me see. So this CBS News reported this, that Venezuelan migrant deported from U.S. to El Salvador has no criminal record, documents show. So they showed a picture of this guy who was deported, but they said he had no criminal record. And I basically commented, crossing the border illegally gives you a criminal record. It's a crime to cross the border. I wish I had the clip from Tyrus from the Gutfeld show this week. He basically said, I don't care if they built 10 churches here in America. You came over illegally, you got to go. Let me see here. And this is what we talked about before. I mentioned that we get to eventually. We finally got to it. So the New York Times reported this week that, again, Elon Musk went to the Department of the Pentagon to be briefed. And supposedly they had 5 sources, New York Times said, that he was there to be debriefed on a plan to go to war with China. And so this is Trump's tweet from today, I believe. The fake news is added again, this time the failing New York Times. They said incorrectly that Elon Musk is going to the Pentagon tomorrow to be briefed on any potential war with China. How ridiculous. China will not even be mentioned or discussed. How disgraceful it is that the discredited media can make up such lies. Anyway, the story is completely untrue. And I quoted this here. I did it in a urban vernacular. I said here is a prime example for completely made up lies that the mainstream media puts out there, which ignorant, low information people, ignorant, that's actually a word, for which ignorant, low information people who act on emotion and not logic and reason to run with. Basic rule, everything in the legacy media about the Trump administration is a lie. And it is. It really is. It's just a set of narrative. That's all it really is. Here it is again, that same tweet. And supposedly FEMA was found 20 times more applicants than homes in LA fires. Breitbart put that out yesterday. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to talk about here. And there's a bunch of stuff here. I mean, Elon Musk said here, let's see this quote here from Elon Musk. He had this to say. If it's come up, maybe it won't. He's basically saying that they're succeeding and that's why you're seeing so much animosity, because Doge is doing its job. So they're fighting back for that reason. So anyway, you're there and check out our social media. Check us out on Locals again and support us then. And we will be going over there probably about 11 o'clock, I'd say, Eastern time, because I don't think I set the chat up to go to Locals. So I have to set up a whole new stream. So it's going to take me some time to do that and to prep a little bit for it. And we'll go to about 11:30 to talk about George Foreman. And on our, I talked to Greg, who is my podcast host for the Old Glory Games podcast, which is a sports-based podcast. And we'll talk a little bit tomorrow live, I believe. I think he said he could do it. Not sure what time we can do it, but we will do something then, and that will be up, and that will be our response to that. I'm very saddened by that because I know that George Foreman just epitomized what it is to be an American. I mean, he just does. I mean, at a time when raising your fist during the Olympics, I think it was 68. Was it Mexico City? When it was a thing to do that, he chose to wave the American flag and support his country. And he just exonerated just hard work and effort and coming back from a devastating loss to Ali, where it was just a terrible loss for him. Such hype and all that stuff, and to get knocked out. And then to come back I guess it was 20 years later, sounds like it, and win the title back again is just an incredible thing. He didn't make excuses. And on top of all that, he became an enterprising man where he had one of the greatest inventions in the history of the country. I mean, how can you not know what a Foreman grill is? I mean, it was just an empire. And so he did that. And as far as I know, all of his sons who are named George are fine, upstanding citizens. He is a family man, hard worker, and just sad to see him go. I mean, sad to see him go. But look for that about 11 o'clock. We'll have that streaming on Locals. And like I said, you can sign up for free. And let me just see if I can find that for you guys before I leave. The actual promotional code. If I can pull it up, I'll let you guys know. It may take me a second to find it. Just bear with me here. Okay, so that's correct. So, yeah, so what you'll do is you will go, let me share my screen. You'll get a supporter status, which is a paid status for 30 days. And let me share this and tell you where you go. So you would go to just join here, and then you would come on to you would come on to support, I think. And then at the bottom here, to be a supporter, you can actually, let me see, where is it? You can go promo code here and type in Brandon there, and that will do it. Can you see that on the screen? You can't see that, can you? All right, well, yeah, so let me find it first and I'll share it. It's funny, I don't actually don't see it. But you still looking. Let me do it from another. No, do it from Rumble. That would be better. Because you would go that way anyway. It looks like they changed their site. Well, what I would say simply is go ahead and go to locals, go to the first page, do support, and then put the promo code Brandon in there, and you get it for a month free. You can quit anytime you want. And I will come back to find out where that thing is for live membership where you don't have to pay. Because right now it's asking for an amount no matter what. And that's not what I remember it to be. So let me take a couple more seconds here till I can find it. Yeah, this is definitely different. So I'll find out how this works because this is not what I remember it to be. Oh, hold on. This is it. This is what you do. Okay. Okay. So what they want you to do essentially is create a Rumble account. That's what it is. So, okay. So essentially what you do, let me go back to show you if I can remember. Bear with me. Let me share. Nope. All right, let's start from scratch here. So go to join, go to support, and then up top here, I gotta share this screen here with you because this isn't working right. Come to this screen here, and then go to log in. So it's still showing. Yep, it is. Do your verify. And then from here, you can go to Rumble and sign up for an account. And I think when you do this, this will allow you to join in with locals for free. And that would give you your access to it for free. So they made it much harder now because there used to be a link at the bottom saying you can just do free here. But now they're saying if you join locals this way, then you will be a register. So basically, me put this on the screen here. I'll make a banner out of this so I won't forget. So work with me here. I know this is kind of awkward, but I don't care. It's my show. I can do this. So let me go back over to where I was. I'm going to create a banner. Register. All right, let's go with that. So that would be the link there. So you would go to theconservativetake.locals.com/register, and that will take you to the direct registration. And from there, you can log in and join us for free. But if not, you just go to the Rumble, click on join, and then go through the process there. And like I said, for the first 30 days, you can get supporter level free, which is basically the paid level for free for 30 days by using promo code Brandon. And with that, guys, I have to go because I got to prep for this. I only have about 14 minutes to go before 11 o'clock, which I promised to go live on Locals. And so with that, guys, I'm going to drop off here. Thanks everyone for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. The conversations here. Kim, thank you for that comment. And we'll keep going forward. We'll be back on hopefully tomorrow with a special edition of the Old Glory Games podcast, talking about George Foreman. And then we'll be back on Monday covering whatever happened during the weekend and what we anticipate to happen next week as well. Should be a busy time. Trump's doing a lot. It's an exciting time to be conservative, and it's an exciting time for this country. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining and being a part of this. My name is Kyle Suggs. This is The Conservative Take. God bless you, and I will see you guys in the next one.